What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday there was quite the quote making the rounds from Ubisoft where they discussed the idea of a subscription digital-based future where gamers will have to get used to not owning their games. We'll dive into all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a sizable leak that appears to have hit Microsoft, giving us the date for what seems to be one of their big developer direct reveals. And we'll also be talking about another game going to PlayStation Plus day one, which in turn has now raised questions around Square Enix confidence in this title. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're going to start today with The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. It's out here in a couple of days, and well, reviews have come out, which is kind of funny because it's been 3.5 years since it released, and now it's basically being reviewed all over again with some additional, like there's some cut content in there that amounts to about 30 or 45 minutes of the game, and it has developer commentary over it. And then of course there's also that like survival roguelike mode attached. Well, we can see over on Metacritic, currently coming in at a 90. That's on 76 critic reviews, and looking through this, there's barely any difference in terms of visuals, which shouldn't surprise anyone after that PlayStation 5 update. I mean, the graphics are already really good in The Last of Us Part 2. So when they show those comparison shots, it is very funny to look at it because they look the same. But in terms of the content, that survival mode unfortunately isn't too lengthy or really built out. It's something apparently people were spending an hour or two in and then kind of getting their fill and moving on. And then the cut content that's added with the commentary, about 30 to 45 minutes. It's weird because this is a paid for upgrade where it's $10 if you have the original, whereas God of War Ragnarok Valhalla was a substantial update. I spent quite a bit of time in that game and it was free. So again, it mixed messaging, it feels like, but I will say, as these reviews mention, this is the best way to play Last of Us Part 2. So if you've not played it, and maybe you just want to get in the Last of Us series in general, Part 1 is there on the PS5, Part 2 is there, and you can kind of go through it, especially if maybe you found the series through way of like the streaming TV series they were doing that is also set to come back in Season 2. Also, we did get some more details as to how Aspyr is working to remaster, at times seemingly remake, Tomb Raider 1 through 3. This collection will be releasing February 14th, so a little under a month from now, and we can see the summary here from VGC, where they discuss a toggle for the different control scheme. That would be for tank-style controls from the PS1 game, or modernized controls based on Tomb Raider Legend, Anniversary, and Underworld era of Tomb Raider. They'll also have some of the in-game items like health kits and ammo. Those are 3D instead of 2D, which I would argue it kind of eliminates some of the charm for where you just kind of see like a 2D cutout of the item on the 3D ground. But you also have health bar for the bosses and a photo mode that I'm sure many of the teenagers from the 90s would have loved to have had. But this sounds actually pretty cool. It's been a while since I've played these games, and I will admit, going back and looking at those tank controls, I feel like they would be kind of archaic, so the modernized controls I think will be a nice touch, although I do also wonder if they could maybe break some elements of the game. But I will absolutely be picking up this collection. I believe it's even on sale for sub $30 for all 3 games. Seems like a pretty good pickup. Again, that's coming out February 14th. Oh, and we had a bit of a surprise. It appears the Topspin series is coming back. This was actually posted up, a teaser trailer, I should say, over on the newly formed YouTube account. Topspin 2K25. Yes, it's from 2K. People, I don't know why, this shouldn't surprise anyone. They were doing the publishing and development of Topspin just 12 or 13 years ago with Topspin 4, which was well received, but obviously now 2K probably going to monetize this thing like crazy, but it's still pretty cool to see Topspin make a return at $70. So Best Buy did have a listing and that was revealed, but all these sports games already made the push up to 70, so 2K clearly is like, well, why not Topspin? But it has been a while, like I said, over a decade now since we had the last one, and that was well reviewed. So I'm interested in what this will turn out to be, how robust and built out it'll be, I'll say that, for that $70 price. But they just put the teaser out now, so I assume we're going to hear more about this as we go through this year, and maybe it's something they release in the second half of the year for the holidays. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Ubisoft and some of their talking points around the digital future as well as the subscription-filled future. Something that we're coming to terms with when it comes to cable TV, how it was, a decade plus ago to where we are now, where we have so many subscription services stacked up that it is about the same or even more than our old cable bill. Well, it kind of feels like publishers are pushing us in that direction when it comes to gaming in general. With Game Pass, EA has their subscription service, Ubisoft, Sony with PlayStation Plus, even Nintendo with their Switch Online service and their legacy titles being attached to that. Well, there was an interview that took place. GamesIndustry.biz had some of these quotes, and well, let's take a look at the main one that people were going over. And this is from, I'll say Philippe Tremblay, that's the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft, saying one of the things we saw is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD, having and owning their games. Crazy idea there, right? That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's not been deleted. You don't lose what you've built in the game or engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable not owning your game. That was the big quote that was going around. Feeling comfortable with not owning your game. He does go on to say, I still have 2 boxes of DVDs. I definitely understand the gamer's perspective with that, but as people embrace that model, they will see that these games will exist, the service will continue, and you'll be able to access them when you feel like that's reassuring. So this is something that I think will still take another generation or two, and I'm not even talking about the systems, I'm talking about the gamers themselves, as I do notice that the younger gamers who are coming in are coming into a world where we already have like a 50-50 split in terms of physical versus digital, a heavy leaning on free-to-play games that don't even have physical versions in general, like Fortnite as a big popular example. But the idea of getting used to not owning your games, that's quite the statement there, of course, being part of a subscription service. And I don't think it's necessarily the idea of losing your progress as he's talking about. Like, we all kind of understand that your save games can be backed up on your hard drive in the cloud. It's more or less the availability of the game, because we've seen so many examples of games just disappearing completely. Like, a great one are any racing games that are 5 or 6 years old now. They just get pulled down. They disappear. Even if it's made by Microsoft, all those older Forza games are just gone. Like, they get pulled out of Game Pass, which is like one of the only real first-party games that get pulled out consistently, and they get pulled off the digital marketplace. Now, if you have a physical copy of like Forza Motorsport 7, we wanted to play that leading up to the latest Forza Motorsport that just released, but that was pulled from the store. And a lot of that has to do, of course, with licensing around cars, and that's just kind of how it is across the board with that, Drive Club and etc. there. So I think that's the biggest thing right now is many of us who are still older in the gaming scene remember the days even of cartridges, sure, but just owning your games, yes, on CD, it doesn't matter, but the idea of kind of leaving it in the hands of publishers, we've just seen too many examples of getting burned for these games being restricted and pulled back, that we might get to a point where they're getting pulled out of our library, because we saw that almost happen, yes, on the movie, film, TV side of things. That was between Sony and Discovery. How long until that ends up being a thing for games? So it's more or less the older gamers now still don't have a lot of trust in publishers keeping these games around in general. But hey, if you have a PS1 game or a Nintendo 64 game, or even before that, you can grab it off your shelf, pop it in, and it'll work just fine, right? So that's kind of where we are, but I do think that with how hard these publishers are pushing now, even from platform holders with the subscription services and leaning more and more to the digital side, because yes, it's more profitable for them and they have more control over it. It's only a matter of time before a couple of generations cycle through and there is no physical game anymore. We're just hearing about all digital games being purchased off the store or part of a subscription service we subscribe to. So how much longer? I don't know, probably another 10 years or so, and that's probably where we'll be. Next up, let's talk about a game from Square Enix that is going into PlayStation Plus day one, and it makes a lot of sense to me, but it seemed to stir up some conversation online as to why it's going into PlayStation Plus, but we can see this posted up over on PlayStation Blog, where they say, hey everyone, Foamstars producer Kosuke Okatani here. We've kept all of you waiting since the announcement of Foamstars May of last year, but we're happy to announce that Foamstars will release on February 6th, 2024. Foamstars will be included as a game in the PlayStation Plus monthly games lineup for February, and we're ecstatic to be able to offer a chance to play. Now they have a little star next to it, and that is based on the range of time you have to claim it for PlayStation Plus. That's between February 6th and March 4th. So if you have PlayStation Plus, starting in February, you may as well claim this and add it to your library, as you should be doing with all the PlayStation Plus games, because you pay for the service, you may as well add all these games that they drop into the service to your library. But people were trying to figure out, okay, why is Square Enix doing this? They just have no confidence in this game, because I believe it's going for $30, so why wouldn't they just sell it normally? Well, this to me is a good way for a game that is going to be heavily reliant on just number of players just getting into the game. Foamstars is a game that I feel like would be going under the radar otherwise, and would be at risk of what happens to all these other live service games. It fizzles out. People try it, and then they move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and then there's just not even enough players left to fill out a room, as we saw with Destruction All-Stars, where they had to start feeding bots into the system just to make sure you had someone to play with. And in this case, that's not necessarily a reflection of the quality of the game, because all the different previews that happened for Foamstars, people seem genuinely surprised at the game itself being good. And I mean, it is obviously something that people are comparing straight up to Splatoon, which apparently the directors and producers around that game aren't happy about it. Although, I mean, look at it. It looks like a Splatoon games. I don't really know where that's coming from, why they wouldn't be like, oh yeah, obviously it's going to get those comparisons. But either way, this to me is a move from Sony to get a multiplayer game in there to kind of hold up their PlayStation Plus service a bit, because you do need PlayStation Plus to play this game online, and then for Square Enix to get more people into a game that I assume is going to have all kinds of other monetization practices attached to it as they go along with how live service games tend to be right now. But hey, either way, if you've been curious about Foamstars and you have PlayStation Plus, look forward to February 6th when it goes live, and you can try it out then. Next up, let's talk about a pretty big leak that's now hit Microsoft, and seemingly was set to be a reveal for their developer direct that is happening tomorrow, which I'm very excited to see what they have for us with things like Indiana Jones, as well as Hellblade 2. Well, one of the things I figured would be the release date for Hellblade, and looks like we don't have to wait too long, as we can see this posted up. This was an exclusive over on Xputer, saying Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 launches May 21st, and they kind of talk a little bit about their source, or at least allude to them, like, well, I can't disclose the source's origin, but the information is reliable enough to be talked about ahead of time. If I had to take a guess, it's probably a press release that's under embargo, that like they showed it to him. Here's the date for it. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to run the report. But at this time, I'm going to assume that this is the correct date, which puts it in the first half of this year. And that's exactly when I said they should try to get Hellblade 2 out. Set up this end of the year, right? The start out, really set the tone with something like Hellblade 2 that I think is going to review well, and I think will just be a good game. And then you have the second half of the year that may include Indiana Jones, which that'd be pretty big for them to have that, as well as obviously Call of Duty, and maybe sprinkle Spyro in there somewhere, and you start to set up a pretty good year for Microsoft, while Sony is kind of like leaning heavily right now on third-party developers and publishers. Microsoft just maybe is about to just bust open the doors with a lot of their first-party studios, as well as some of their own third-party offerings. As we can see, Stalker 2, they did reveal the release date. That's September 5th. So again, kind of lining up, setting up Game Pass with what they were trying to do, the one big release per quarter. So interesting stuff here. We'll see how Hellblade 2 looks along with Indiana Jones at this developer direct, and who knows, maybe another surprise or two. Some exciting stuff though coming up tomorrow, I think. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an announcement that came out of nowhere, surprised everyone, and then turned out to be incorrect, although the whole situation seems odd, and that has to do with Final Fantasy XIV in open beta releasing on Xbox. Well, apparently that happened yesterday. That was according to not only an Xbox Wire post, but a Twitter post that went up, and then it started to explode online because it seemed like they just shadow dropped the game a month early. Remember, we had talked about this in a previous episode of Newswave that we were expecting Final Fantasy XIV to go into open beta midway through February. That was at least their target on the Xbox. Well, Microsoft pulled everything down, which, by the way, that news post that they had at graphics, the whole thing, it was again, very strange, but they did post this up just to kind of correct the situation here over on X, where they say, we incorrectly posted news this morning regarding the Final Fantasy XIV online open beta. We'll follow up with the correct date when available. We apologize for any confusion. Xbox Wire team. So now people, of course, believe that this is the shadow drop, although I wouldn't count on it, is what I'll say. I kind of thought that myself. I was like, oh, okay, well, they pushed that 48 hours too early. They were just going to show up on the developer direct, that being Square Enix alongside Phil Spencer again, and hey, Final Fantasy XIV is available right now in open beta. Not based on some of the people I've talked, I think that's still a mid-February, we'll say, release, end of February release, all right, for Final Fantasy XIV, and that going open beta means you'll just be able to play it for free. Like, it'll just be on Xbox. It was up to like level 70 or something, so you get a good chunk of the game to try out. And yes, when it goes to Xbox, because I was going to talk about it on our direct Xbox podcast, I will try out Final Fantasy XIV. Maybe I'll run through some of it with Nate, and we'll see what we think of the game now. So, but yeah, I wouldn't go into the developer direct tomorrow expecting it. I would look towards February and just assume that this was one of the weirdest mix-ups that happened behind the scene. Maybe with someone new there, they had an intern come in and they just kind of messed things up on the Xbox Wire side. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played any of the original Tomb Raider games from the PS1 era? 54% say yes, 46% say no. Okay, so I know Tomb Raider 2013, Rise of the Tomb Raider, kind of shadowed Tomb Raider, but definitely those first two of that newer trilogy were very, very popular in terms of sales. That original trilogy from like the PS1 era, I don't know if it would click very well with like modern day gaming with the current generation, but having those modernized controls added in as an option, the graphics have seen an overhaul here, some additional surprises. I think this could go over really, really well for just the Tomb Raider franchise in general. And again, it's been a while since I've gone back to it. 28 years. Wow, 28 years. Well, I will definitely be checking this one out next month on February 14th when it releases. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from username saying, I don't see why anyone would trade in games at a retailer when you could sell it on eBay and usually get several times the amount. It's so profitable for the retailer because they're giving the customer a bad deal. Well, I'm not going to disagree with you on that last line that they're giving the customer a bad deal, because obviously they're giving you like 30% or something of what they're going to sell it for. Really, the argument is, and I saw this happen constantly with people who would come in and trade stuff in, it's incredibly convenient not having to post on eBay, sell it, pay fees to eBay, and then ship it out, whereas it takes you a couple minutes to hand the games over and then get what you want, which is another game, right? So there is kind of that time aspect to it. How much is your time worth? How much is the effort worth to you? And 9 times out of 10, the person at the register who's like, oh, that's it? And then they kind of do it in their head. They think about all this. They're like, all right, yeah, fine. Here's a bunch of games. I'll take the new Call of Duty. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Well, there's Ubisoft's comments around gamers getting used to not owning their games. What do you think about a future that's filled of subscription services and digital games? Then also, what about Hellblade 2 coming out in May? Are you excited that maybe it's coming up a bit sooner than you were thinking? And then Foamstars going into PlayStation Plus day 1. Are you interested in trying that one out next month? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.